everybody, and welcome to Charts with Dan, recapping this past July 4th weekend, certainly the slowest box office weekend for Independence Day weekend that we've seen maybe ever, but some unexpected movies in the top 10, plus we are talking about Hamilton and its debut on Disney+, what its box office prospects might have been, and a couple more things, including what everyone's watching at home. But let's get to what we know of the box office for this past Independence Day weekend, and the number one movie is Ghostbusters, the original 1984 Ghostbusters. It is the number one film in America for the second time on July 4th. It actually was number one during its initial release over the July 4th weekend. It is now number one for a second July 4th weekend, just over $500,000 in total grosses there. Number two, Jumanji, Welcome to the Jungle, followed by Relic, which is the only new release in the top five. This is the directorial debut of Natalie Erica James, produced by Jake Gyllenhaal. Then Jurassic Park and Jaws, the two Spielberg movies that have been floating around the top five, there at number 4 and 5. And then, just for fun, let's look at what 6 through 10 were. Again, this is for the 3-day July 4th weekend, July 3rd, 4th, and 5th. Deadpool comes in at number 6 as more studios start putting their library films out there for people to go see, followed by The Jungle Book, 2016's Jungle Book. Then Star Wars The Force Awakens there at number 8, The Hunt at number 9, and My Spy. My Spy has had a really rocky road of it. If you remember going back to the very beginning of when theaters first started shutting down, My Spy was scheduled to be released in mid-March. It was one of the first movies that had its release date rescheduled and pulled. It was pulled just a week before it was supposed to come out. There were billboards and posters for My Spy all over the place here in Los Angeles, and there were for many, many weeks afterwards. That movie is now on Amazon, is available on Amazon. They bought the rights to it, but it was also opened in some drive-ins and theaters around the country, so it actually comes in at number 10 as it finally gets a release of sorts. Now, there's also some, if you look at the total, there's some Canadian numbers because it actually came out in Canada prior to being pulled from its release date here in the United States. So My Spy has had quite a odd path, but really haven't we all over these last several months? It's there at number 10. Now, since last week's show, we've actually also gotten these estimated numbers in for that box office, the weekend of June 26th through 28th. So let's look at the top 10 as well to see what movies were number one last weekend at the box office. And Zootopia, as I mentioned, Disney and other studios are starting to release more of their films into the drive-in and the limited theaters that are open to get some of that revenue coming in. Zootopia was the number one film last weekend, followed by The Avengers, Jurassic Park, again there in the top 5, then The Greatest Showman and The Hunt. No new releases as far as movies that came out post-pandemic in the top 5 for last weekend. Looking at 6 through 10, The Invisible Man came in at number 6, followed by Trolls World Tour, Jaws, Bloodshot, and then we had Irresistible, which is the latest directorial effort from Jon Stewart. So that's the top 10 for this Independence Day weekend, the top 10 for last weekend as well. Sony actually, by virtue of Ghostbusters being number one, takes the July 4th crown 2 years in a row, because last year, Spider-Man Far From Home. It's hard to believe that was just a year ago, but it was. That was the number one film over the Independence Day weekend last year. So they take the crown 2 years in a row, although that crown looks a lot different in just 1 year's time. Speaking of July 4th weekends of years past, let's take a look at a flashback, and we are going back to the Independence Day weekend, July 3rd, 4th, and 5th of 1999. And that's when a true film classic debuted. Wild Wild West, starring Will Smith and Kevin Kline, made its debut 21 years ago, which means that Wild Wild West, the movie, is now old enough to drink and watch itself, which is good because a lot of other people have done that in the years since it was released. It's hard to believe the millennium, the Willennium, if you will, was fast approaching. Wild Wild West, easily the worst movie in the Will Smith July 4th trilogy. So Wild Wild West there at number 1. Also debuting that weekend, South Park Bigger, Longer, and Uncut, one of my favorite modern movie musicals, there at number 2. Both of those films had actually opened earlier in the week to get a jump on the July 4th holiday, so that's not all of the money they had made to that point. That's just for the weekend window. Looking at 3 through 5, you had The Phantom Menace there, still holding in there many weeks after its debut back in May of 1999. Spike Lee's Summer of Sam debuted in 4th place, and then you had Notting Hill rounding out the top 5. I remember Wild Wild West coming out. It was not good. So before we go any further, I do have to acknowledge the passing. The news broke late last night, early this morning, of a true giant in the world of movie music and really the world of music in general. Ennio Morricone has passed away. He was one of the most prolific and renowned composers in entertainment history, really. Hundreds of credits to his name, including some of the best movie scores ever written. I would be here for 30 minutes if I tried to list all of the credits to his name, so I will list just a few. The Untouchables, one of my favorites of his scores. Cinema Paradiso, The Mission, The Thing, Days of Heaven, Once Upon a Time in the West, The Man with No Name trilogy, including The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, which is one of the most famous and influential scores ever written. It really is the passing of a titan, of a legend in music. And I've talked about this with John Williams too, is, just because the medium of the time is movies, I don't think that great composers should be earmarked as, oh, they write good movie music. No, they just write good music. And Ennio Morricone wrote great music, just as John Williams writes great music. So if you haven't heard Ennio Morricone's music, first of all, yes, you have. You just didn't know that it was Ennio Morricone's music, but look up just almost any of his work. One of the great things about discovering film is seeing all of these new filmmakers and new movies and new genres and everything emerge over time, watching the art form evolve. But the flip side and the dark side of that is that, you also have to see these legends, these titans pass away. Ennio Morricone was a titan. Also passing away this week, very sad, Carl Reiner, who was a titan of comedy, who both on film and on television was involved with so many things, from his partnership with Mel Brooks to his involvement with the Dick Van Dyke Show. He directed The Jerk with Steve Martin, one of the funniest comedies of all time. Obviously, his son, Rob Reiner, has his own legacy of directing and acting. Carl Reiner was a vocal and an outspoken and a funny man up until the very end. He also passed away just a couple of days ago. So it's so sad when you have to say goodbye to these legends. The only consolation being that both of these men lived very long, very productive lives that brought a lot of joy and a lot of laughter, a lot of emotion to so many people over their years. And we would all be so lucky to live a life of that much impact. And so to Ennio Morricone and to Carl Reiner and their families, of course, all the condolences and all the respect in the world for two legendary careers that will not be forgotten anytime soon. Let's turn now to what people are watching at home. We've seen what people are watching at theaters, at least the ones that are open. Let's see what people are watching at home on TV. And let's look first at what Amazon, these are the top selling movies. This is both purchases and rentals over on Amazon. The King of Staten Island stays at number 1, followed by Trolls World Tour. Then Jumanji: The Next Level, Spike Lee's Black Klansman, perhaps spurred by the release of his newest film, The Five Bloods. Then The Hunger Games: Catching Fire, there at number 5. The Gentleman, Game Night, Sonic the Hedgehog, Bad Boys for Life, and Bloodshot. And I think that that's really a testament to the environment that we're in. If you look at just the last few months, those have been mainstays, particularly Trolls, The Gentleman, Game Night, Bloodshot, Sonic the Hedgehog. These are some of the newest movies that people have access to, and with the absence of new major releases, and when I say major releases, I mean big studio releases that, had hit theaters, which hasn't happened for months now, we're seeing these films stay in that top 10. And I think the good question, because we have no idea for what the rate is in how many sales, is it that demand has dropped to the point where they stick around because they're newest, or is it that these films are making so much money on VOD that they continually land in the top 10? Studios notoriously don't release grosses for things like VOD, which we're going to talk about in a moment here when we talk about Hamilton. But I think that as it becomes a bigger part of the movie-going marketplace, the curiosity, certainly on my part, but also just for people to know how movies are doing, is going to grow to know how these films do, not just in theaters, but when they're released to be able to watch at home, particularly if VOD and premium VOD become even bigger parts of the marketplace going forward. Let's look at what people are watching over on iTunes. The Outpost is the number one most rented / purchased movie on iTunes. This is a Rod Lurie film about the Battle of Kamdesh in Afghanistan. It's distributed by Screen Media Films, which is actually owned by Chicken Soup for the Soul Entertainment. And the stock in that went up because this was a better than expected debut. As I mentioned, Rod Lurie directed it, Orlando Bloom amongst the stars of the film, based on a book by Jake Tapper, who is a journalist. So The Outpost, number one. Then at number two, we've got Terminator Dark Fate, which is the 99-cent rental on iTunes. A lot of people taking advantage of that 99-cent rental for Dark Fate. And while I hated what they did to the Terminator franchise in that movie, I liked the action. I got to say, you're getting a pretty good bargain there, in my opinion, at 99 cents. If you just ignore anything that has to do with what they do to the franchise in that movie. Trolls World Tour there at number 3. Independence Day at number 4. If you're one of those people that rented or bought Independence Day on iTunes and you want to watch it with a really neat commentary track, you can click the little card right there. Mara and I sat and watched the movie and recorded our thoughts. A full feature-length commentary. There's instructions on how to sync it up, but we had a lot of fun doing it, and we may do more of those for the channel if people like it a lot. So if you want to watch Independence Day with our commentary, click the card. We'd love to watch it along with you.
Click the card.
Force of Nature, which is the latest Mel Gibson vehicle in front of the camera, is there at number 5, co-starring Emile Hirsch and Kate Bosworth. Then we have Irresistible from Jon Stewart, which, as we mentioned, was number 10 last week at the box office as far as people going to the movies. Number 6 here on iTunes for rental and purchase. Then Sonic the Hedgehog, Looper, The Invisible Man, and Tomb Raider. It's funny to see these movies like Looper and Tomb Raider that kind of pop up into this top 10. Independence Day I get, obviously, with July 4th, but you always wonder what makes these movies bubble up. We were talking about The Great Outdoors a few weeks ago. I don't know. People just get in the mood to watch some things. Netflix, looking at the top 10 of what people are watching over there, there is Patriots Day, starring Mark Wahlberg, probably, I'm sure, tied to the Independence Day, July 4th holiday here in the United States. Then Desperados, which is the latest Netflix original to be distributed on the platform. The Town, 2 great comedies, 1,000 Words, and I Now Pronounce You Chuck and Larry. Happy birthday, America. I hope you like crap. Then Double Jeopardy, 365 Days, and Eurovision falling much farther than they were last week. These are the only 2 holdovers from last week. People seem to be looking for a lot of newer movies over the July 4th weekend. And then at number 9, we've got Extraction, but it's not the Chris Hemsworth one. It's not the Netflix original Extraction. It's actually the 2015 Bruce Willis movie Extraction, which makes me wonder, are people seeking out the 2015 Bruce Willis one, or are Netflix's computers giving people that one when they're looking for the Chris Hemsworth one, and then they watch a minute of that and it counts, but then they're actually not looking for that movie at all? Because I think it would be a real coincidence if a 5-year-old Bruce Willis movie that has the same name as a recent Netflix movie would randomly pop up into the top 10, for no apparent reason. So Bruce Willis and 2015's Extraction may be getting a little bit of a bump from Chris Hemsworth and 2020's Netflix film Extraction. The world may never know. And then there at number 10, The Witches, which seems out of season, but maybe the kids are just enjoying some witchcraft over July 4th. I don't know, but there it is at number 10. Of course, the big thing that people were talking about this weekend was the Disney Plus release of Hamilton, a filmed version of the Broadway stage musical. People discovering the show for the first time, including myself. If you want to see my review, it was my first impressions. I'd never seen the show, never listened to the original cast recording. You can check the card right up there, see what I thought of the movie. But that was the dominant entertainment-related thing, at least as far as I saw this weekend. It was released for streaming on the 3rd, which was Friday. All weekend I saw on Twitter and social media, etc., that people were watching the film. Now, originally, Disney paid $70 million for the global distribution rights for Hamilton, and they were going to release it in theaters in October of 2021. However, once the pandemic hit, they decided that they were going to self-distribute it on Disney Plus over a year early. And the question is, first of all, obviously, it drove a lot of interest and a lot of engagement on social media. But it got me thinking, because you know how I like my hypotheticals, how the movie might have opened had it opened in theaters as Disney originally intended. Let's go into a pocket universe where none of this ever happened, which seems like a really attractive thing to do. So let's indulge ourselves. Let's pretend that everything had happened as was expected, and we've been talking about Black Widow and Mulan and all the movies that already came out. Some of them probably sucked. That's just how it goes. Let's look forward. We're going to jump all the way into October 2021 and look at the prospects for Hamilton if it had been released. So first of all, let's look at the top 5 openings for musicals in general to see where it would have happened and what kind of competition it was facing. As you can see, the number 1 film, The Lion King from last year, then Beauty and the Beast from 2017, Frozen 2, and Aladdin. So 3 of them are live action / CG that look like live action remakes of Disney musicals. One of them's Frozen 2. And then yes, Pitch Perfect 2 is in there because I count that as a musical. I'm putting Pitch Perfect 2 in there. If you want to throw in The Jungle Book, then that'd be an opening right around $90-100 million. But if you're talking about Hamilton and where it would open, that's the kind of competition it's looking at to get into the top 5 of all time. So how many people would have to go see it on opening weekend for it to crack that top 5? Well, I did the numbers as I do. If you count Pitch Perfect 2 at the low end, on the $9.01 average ticket price that I have for 2019, 7,682,230 people approximately would have to go see Hamilton on opening weekend for it to crack that top 5. Is that a realistic number? Well, let's look at the numbers that we do have for Hamilton. We know that 6 million copies of the original cast recording have been sold over the years. It's certified 6 times platinum. We know that 2.6 million people, according to the statistics, have seen the Broadway show. Now, this does not count the traveling tours that go around the country that have been to the Pantages here in LA a couple times. This is strictly Broadway numbers. 2.6 million people, or at least 2.6 million tickets have been sold. And if you can get a ticket more than once to Hamilton, good on you, because I know most people that couldn't even get it one time. By the way, that translates to a $650 million gross for Hamilton. It is truly the Avengers endgame of musicals, at least as far as Broadway goes. Back in 2016, PBS ran a special called Hamilton's America that attracted 3.6 million viewers. That was way higher than the average viewership for anything on PBS at that time. Also, Disney reported that over the weekend that there was a 72% uptick in mobile app downloads that translated to about 266,000 in the United States. Now, this only measures the Apple Store and the Android marketplace. This does not measure things that were updated on smart TVs, on Roku, Fire Stick, any of that stuff. This is just in the app stores for Apple and Android. So what does this prove? I think this does prove that when Hamilton is available to a wider audience on PBS or on Disney Plus, we see an uptick in demand. We see that more people look for those things, tune in the case of PBS, or download the app in the case of Disney Plus, who conveniently ended free trials shortly before Hamilton premiered. That's the mouse for you. I think one thing that does indicate is that when you expose Hamilton to the air, in a sense, when you take it off the stage and put it into the public eye, that you are going to see a surge in public demand. It doesn't seem like it's constrained to just the smaller group of people that have seen the show. So I think that bodes well for the fact that Hamilton could perhaps have jumped into that top 5. Now, a couple things that might work against Hamilton drawing that kind of number is that it seems like the closer that a movie is to the stage version of a musical, the harder of a sell that it is to the average moviegoer. For example, The Producers, which was a very, very close, closely analogous to the Broadway musical, did not do well at all in theaters. We just saw that Cats was a big flop in theaters. Chicago is the most, I think, would probably be called the biggest success as far as a stage-to-screen adaptation in the 21st century. Of course, way back when, in the age of Sound of Music and Fiddler on the Roof and movies like that, it was actually pretty common for a movie to jump from Broadway to the screen with big box office results. You've seen that less and less in the recent years. But if you're going to ask for my hunch, and that's really all it is at this point, is a hunch, I think when you look at the fact that every time that Hamilton has been exposed to a larger audience, that you see increased demand, and the fact that it would be handled by Disney, the marketing, promotion, ad blitz that would be going out, the fact that there'd be plenty of people like myself that have never seen the show that would be interested in doing that, I think that bodes well for the fact that you would see that increased interest and increased engagement. I would love to see Disney release the numbers that would say how many people or how many accounts watched Hamilton over that first weekend, because keep in mind, 7,682,230. That's about the number of tickets that movie would have to sell to get into that range of the 5 best musical openings of all time. So if Disney does release some numbers and you see things in that range, that bodes well for it, in that it would have had a very high opening. Now, streaming works differently than box office. People that already have Disney Plus might not watch it right away, or the people that downloaded Disney Plus might not have watched Hamilton. There's no way for us to know those things. Not like when somebody buys a ticket, you know that money went to that movie because that's how it's reported. But I also think something that would have worked in its favor is the fact that the reviews on Rotten Tomatoes for people that are reviewing the filmed version have been almost universally positive. As a matter of fact, they're at 99% minus the required Armand White dissenting opinion that you get with just about every big movie that's at 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. So the adaptation itself is well reviewed. It doesn't seem to have lost a lot in the translation. So that, plus the fact that a lot of people already know the music or want to know what the stage production looked like or felt like. It's the closest thing you can get to being in the theater, particularly with the original cast. I think that Hamilton would have transcended what a lot of box office shows do, and I think that it would have been in that Pitch Perfect 2 range. I think we could have seen an opening around 65 to 70 million, given the fact that you'd only need 7.5 million people or so to go see it. I think that marketplace exists out there. If you combine the people that love Hamilton, have seen it, and want to go see it on the big screen, the people that don't know Hamilton like myself and would be curious about going to see it in the big screen, yes, there is often limited box office potential to Broadway shows, but I think the one thing that Hamilton has proven time and time again is that it transcends that amount of interest and exceeds expectations. And I think that we would have seen that with Hamilton's debut. So before we go, there are a couple of countdowns to get to. The first is the countdown to new movies. Unhinged is still reportedly 25 days away. There has been no change right now in the summer movie release schedule. However, there was some reporting done by Deadline that said that there will be a reevaluation of the release dates that are currently on the schedule, and that if it's determined that the end of this month, as is currently scheduled for so many things, / the beginning of August, seems like it's not going to happen, that you could see the movies that are currently on the schedule move back in a block, 1 to 2 weeks, or perhaps even more, if it's determined that perhaps even the delayed release is not good. So I don't even put this in pencil, don't even put it in chalk. I would just kind of like sketch it onto a piece of paper that's already thrown in the garbage can that you can fish out if that turns out to be the correct number of days. So right now, 25 days, although I think that is very much in question, as well as future release dates. Also mentioned in that Deadline article the fact that the third installment in the Conjuring series may well move to 2021. Don't be surprised if you see that happen here in the next week or two. The other countdown that we're looking at is the countdown to New Mutants. Its release date has yet to change, even amongst the recent slate of release date changes. So it is currently on the schedule for 53 days from today. Will that actually happen? I don't know. I don't think so, but I hope that it does, because if this movie actually comes out in theaters, that means that there are movies coming out in theaters. I'll wait to the end of time if it means that that's how long we have to wait for New Mutants to come out, but I certainly hope that that won't be the case. But we are allegedly and currently 53 days away from the release of that movie. So those are the charts for this week. Yet another week of turning very little news into the best I can do. I'm like Rumpelstiltskin over here. I'm just trying to spin straw into what approximates gold. I hope you enjoyed watching. If you did, please leave a comment down below. Like, share, subscribe, hit that bell so you know when I'm going to be uploading the next charts video. Who knows what the next one's going to be? Like I said, there could be some big release date changes coming up, but everything is firm as of right now. That could change in 10 or 15 minutes, or by the time this video is uploaded, we will see. Thank you so much for watching, and to one particular viewer at home, I'd like to say hi to my mom. Mara and I were supposed to drive down and see my mom this week, but we're not able to right now. Really looking forward to the day when we can. Hopefully that'll be soon. So hi, Mom. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you soon. And thank you for watching at home, and I'll see you next time.